Thanks so much. So welcome everybody to today's Futures Forum. We're delighted to have you here and could not be more thrilled about the panel that you're about to hear from and everything that you're going to be able to engage with today. It is quite fitting that this session is taking place in the summertime because this is a topic that is scorching hot, almost blazing white to the touch, white hot to the touch. And what we're going to talk about today is what everyone has come to call generative AI. And the title of our panel today is From Wow to How, Real Talk about Generative AI for Legal Teams. Now, that hype machine is in overdrive. If you're attending this session, chances are you may have already read an article, seen a white paper, experienced a marketing pitch, talked to your partners about, or are actually engaging and exploring how to use generative AI. It's really something for all of us who are focused on legal technology and innovation to be part of what is going on right now. And could not be more excited about the panel of experts and practitioners who have joined us today to engage a little bit on what this all means for us, not just in a theoretical way, but in a practical way, exploring what organizations are doing today. So from left to right on the screen, you'll see that we have Casey Flaherty, Chief Strategy Officer at LexFusion. We also have Katherine Lowry, Chief Information Officer at BakerHostetler, Lydia Petrakis, Senior Corporate Counsel and Digital Strategist at Microsoft, and Darth Vaughn, Litigation Counsel and Legal Innovation Lead at Ford Motor Company. And I'm pleased to be here as your moderator today. My name is Farah Pepper, and I'm Chief Legal Innovation Counsel at Marsh McLennan. And so what you have here today is a great cross-section of our ecosystem. We have a leader at a law firm. We have two panelists from in-house legal teams grappling with the implications of this today. You also have Casey, who by virtue of his role gets to interact with all aspects of the ecosystem. And I also come at it from the in-house legal practitioner perspective. And so we'll start things out by just saying there's a lot to unpack here. And what we're going to attempt to do is hit some of the key concepts and topics that are top of mind for this group. We would invite you, if you have any questions that you would like this group to tackle, you may leverage the chats. We'll try to reserve some time at the end to delve into that a little bit. Now, before we dive into it with our panel, I will note lingo matters. And we thought long and hard when we were crafting the title of this presentation today, how to frame this. And it seems to be that the industry is coalescing around generative AI as a concept, as a shorthand to discuss this. You may be talking about it as ChatGPT, but as you either know or will come to know, that's not the whole story. That's one iteration of what people are calling large language models. You will also find people who will start using terms that you may have never even heard of because it's what their organization has coined or are using to refer to these tools. And so one of the things we'll try to do today is also come to a common understanding on language and have you walking away with some use cases that you either could explore for you or the partners that you work with. All right, so with all of that out of the way, let's get down to the fun stuff. And let's start out by posing a question to the group. So the first question would be, based on all this hype, where are organizations really in their journey in exploring or acting on generative AI? Is it real? And Casey, I'll pick on you first and ask, what do you think?
I definitely think it's real, but the word explore is probably the appropriate term. These are foundation models. ChatGPT was just a chat interface for a raw foundation model. They are designed to be the foundation of applications, and the road to product is long. And it's going to take time, patience, effort, organization, knowledge management, and just work to get this very promising, potentially transformative tech in the place where it needs to be, where it's having the kind of impact that so many of us foresee. That doesn't mean that you can just put it on the back burner and wait to come back in 18 months to 3 years when many of the applications are more mature, because the world is moving very quickly. And if you're a lawyer, whether it's at a law firm or an in-house role, you have clients who are looking to use this tech in their day-to-day business. And so you need to be informed about it in order to advise them properly. In addition, you need to start on the work that I just referred to, knowledge management, the organization, identifying use cases, experimentation, to ensure that you are ready to incorporate this tech, as well as informed enough to be able to make build and or buy decisions when you identify pieces of the tech that are mature enough for use cases that are meaningful to you. And so, yes, it's real, but most organizations are in the exploration / experimentation phase. Some are a bit more advanced in that, for sure, but they tend to be outliers.
So with that, Katherine, CIO of a major law firm, where do you think people are, and are you able to speak about where you are?
I agree with Casey. I think that there's a lot of exploration that's going on right now. I tend to think that it might be a little bit more surface level deep and maybe wanting to get into the experimental phase of it. So I think, that's kind of yet to be seen and sometimes hard to tell. Because I think we're all trying to drink through a fire hose right now with what's going on with vendors out in the market, right? Coming to us saying, hey, I've got Gen AI and it's going to be released in my product in 30 days. So I think there's a lot of that going on. For us, I think we are kind of heavy on the exploration experimental side of this, in so much that this year we have been able to institute a generative AI working group that has then been broadened to a task force, especially across security, our network engineers, specifically cloud network engineers, our innovation team, working closely with our apps dev and legal research. It's a broad net that's being casted for us to explore use cases. But we've had a lot of meeting with vendors. We have been on Microsoft campus to learn more about Gen AI and their offerings that are coming out in that kind of horizontal play. We've worked with Gartner and security analysts. Last but not least, there's actually two more things. One of the most important things is that we early on secured access to a GPT-4 model, as well as a couple of other models that we have in our sandbox, but our sandbox being a private, secure Azure tenant, so that we can start to identify use cases to try to cycle through. And then just last week, we held our own private generative AI masterclass, and we brought in a third-party Microsoft partner to help us dive deeper into what we need to do to be able to do more with generative AI. So that's where we're at today.
So that's fantastic. So it sounds like a lot of learning, but in a very proactive way. And now, so that's a law firm approach. Darth, what do you think? On the in-house side, you and your team, are you taking a similar approach, and what might you be doing to prepare?
We're about 11 months into our journey. We got early access to GPT-4, and we felt confident that we could experiment in a pretty secure environment. Through that, I agree that there needs to be a lot of exploration, but I also think that there needs to be a lot of training invested right now into what generative AI is. You need to understand how it differs from other subsets of AI. We're going to need to know how we can evaluate the quality of the output, how to troubleshoot errors, and kind of how to manage the data and privacy and security risks. We've identified tremendous use cases across pretty much every practice area, but there's no easy button. You still need to analyze your current workflows, identify any bottlenecks you have, determine if generative AI is actually something that can assist you streamlining those processes at all. And we've given a lot of thought to like the regulatory and ethical implications of how we're using it in our operations. From there, you develop your strategy. And I would tell everyone, even though I think, agree on this webinar that legal ops is a cornerstone and foundation to really running the legal practice like a business, you're going to have new roles and domain expertise on your teams. You're going to have specialists that understand the technology. You're going to need to invest in data scientists. And I, for one, am considering maybe partnering with some universities or data science firms, potentially recruit talent from there into the legal department.
So that's fascinating. And I imagine also interesting to a lot of folks on the line who are probably thinking to themselves, new roles, that's either going to be a set of skills that I'm going to have to learn, or I'm going to have to hire somebody to do. And it's not that often in the legal space that we as a group, as an industry, agree that there's going to be a whole new subset of talents and roles that need to be created. I suppose a positive thing as we head into what some believe will be a rocky economic era. Okay, so with that in mind, I did hear you mention that there could be perhaps some misconceptions about generative AI. And Casey, you've given this a lot of thought. Do you want to react to that statement?
Well, as much as I hate to, I've got to agree with Darth. There are definitely misconceptions, and there's misconceptions on all sides. I start a rather long presentation I have with the three blind people touching an elephant at different points and describing it, which is a famous parable, because no one's wrong, but people are partially correct in ways that are dangerous. I separate them into hypists, haters, and headlinists. Hypists are the people who think that it's magic, that Darth's easy button has in fact been invented, and that we don't need to worry about anything because the genie is going to take care of it. Knowledge management is no longer something we need to worry about. Thinking is no longer something we need to worry about. The AI will handle it all. They're not wrong that there's something transformative afoot here, and that we should be excited, even if they go way too far in seeing its potential. The haters have dug into what's currently available and found it wanting, not ready for prime time, not all that magical, not all that different than in terms of its outputs from a lot of tech we've had forever, and are therefore dismissing it as just another fad. And they're not wrong, and then it is certainly overhyped in a lot of respects. But I do think that we've passed a fundamental inflection point with respect to the technology, and it opens up use cases, again, once we've done the work, that are far beyond what we thought was likely in the near term, even a year ago. It's amazing. ChatGPT released on November 30th last year, and that seems like it was 2 years ago, if not longer. And then finally, the headlinists are people who've heard of this tech but haven't really dug in any meaningful way, and they've been skimming the headlines. And this is true of everyone, but it's particularly true of a lot of lawyers. They've seen things about hallucinations, creation of bogus cases, IP lawsuits, data security breaches, concerns about privilege, concerns about labor and employment. You can go down the list, and every single one of those issues is a valid issue. I don't want to make light of them, but like so many issues, they are nuanced and contextual and require a bit more understanding. And baseline skepticism is healthy as long as it is informed rather than reflexive. And the headline skimmers use those headlines to feed a fair amount of reflexive skepticism. The grand fear that I've been writing about since, well, January 1st is consultants being in the C-suite talking about using AI for aggressive digital transformation, and then the lawyers not being in the room. And then when the lawyers are finally invited to confer, screaming, but hallucinations and data security, which they're not wrong. But it also shows that they haven't engaged enough to meaningfully contribute to the conversation. And when we talk about exploration and experimentation, part of it is getting to the point where you can be a meaningful participant to the conversation, whether it's to drive the organization forward because there's good use cases, or to help mitigate risks and slow things down if the organization is headed for something that is not ultimately in its best interest.
So that's great. So Lydia, flipping to the in-house perspective, what do you think? Are there these misconceptions or partial conceptions, pieces of the elephant, if you will, that are bedeviling your exploration process?
Yes, I agree with Casey, and there are misconceptions. There's two that I thought we'd focus on today that I hear privately, across industry, but internally as well. The first being that the magic robots are just going to fix everything, and we don't have to prepare. So this is inaccurate. We need to start putting more information into central locations and with the proper permissions, so these robots can actually see the information. For example, as we all know, Outlook can be one of a lawyer's favorite tools. Much of our work is done within Outlook, but if the valuable piece of information that everybody in the organization needs is in my inbox, that's not going to provide value for anybody else. So we're going to have to start working on putting our information in more central locations. And that also means we're going to have to start investing more in data governance. So there's actually proper permissions, but also that there's good data for all of these robots and generative AI technologies to be able to come over. Also leads to one of the prior comments about new roles and different areas we have to focus on. And then one of the other second misconceptions that I see a lot is that somebody else in my firm or my company is going to figure this all out for me. There's a special team and I don't have to do anything. And this, I think, is a misconception. I think we're all going to need to be fluent in AI, from everything of its use cases, how it's used, or to your point, Fair, at the beginning, the right lingo so we can all start talking together. So everyone's going to need to learn more about generative AI. So in Microsoft particularly, one of the most powerful people in our department is actually being asked to lead our new program. It's called AI for CELA. It's our acronym for our Corporate External and Legal Affairs Department. So we're really taking it seriously. And again, to the prior point in questions, we're investing in a CLS, or Corporate External and Legal Affairs Academy, where we're spending time in making sure that people are going to be skilled up, and we give and invest in our people for that learning journey. And then we're all going to need to start experimenting and continuing to use it. We can't wait for it to just be perfect. So as many of you heard, I think Casey or Garth, I'm not sure who mentioned it, prompt engineering. So one of the best ways to get the most value out of this technology is being able to write a proper prompt. And that's not the same as what we may be used to with keywords in a Bing or a Google search. So we need to make sure we're giving concise and clear instructions, more like we would a younger associate or counsel or an intern in our company versus just 2 words. You wouldn't give them 2 words and expect a great piece of work product. We're also just going to have to get smarter on the context we instruct our models on.
So Lydia, that's wonderful. And asking on behalf of a friend, AKA everyone who's in this webinar, as Microsoft is putting together training academies and resources for their own internal teams, is this something that's anticipated to be made available to other legal teams in some form?
I can't speak to it yet because the CELA Academy is being formed. There's actually a job posting on LinkedIn if you haven't seen it yet. So focusing internally first, but as always, we always want to help all of our customers and partners. Our mission is to empower every person on the planet, to achieve more. So I'm sure we'll be making value and use to help the rest of the industry.
Terrific. And Katherine, if you don't mind me bouncing back to you, can you talk a little bit from the law firm side? What kind of education, you mentioned it a little bit, are you really delving into for your attorneys? And then in turn, are you providing that back to your clients?
Yes and yes. From the internal team, you have to remember I'm a CIO, so it's more on the practical application. What is this? How does it fit in the tech stack? What are the security measures and protocols that you have to go through to make sure that you're not feeding information back to a larger model? All of this is kind of serving to help us even evaluate vendors to be able to say, we want to lift the hood, tell us a little bit more. But in upskilling that infrastructure team, the security team, and the innovation team, we're teaching them skills on similar to what we've already done with emerging tech or advanced technology, and that's problem solving. What can this technology do? What problems do we have around the organization? What's the priority of them? And what are we going to solve first? I think that there is, on the generative AI side, it is skill building around prompt engineering, but in a deeper level prompt engineering, be embedding, the difference between that and fine tuning and understanding those so that we can have that buy versus build discussion. Level of effort. If you put attorneys in the room, and to your point, Casey had my entire, well, not entire, but a large number of my leadership at this firm that run this law firm in a room, and we built use cases. What would be of high impact to them? What would be of low impact to them? But what I couldn't ask them to do was level of effort. That's what my team had to be able to bring to the table. So what do I mean by level of effort? Well, if I'm going to build a generative AI solution, is it one shot? Is it few shots? Is it embedding? Is it fine tuning? That is your trajectory of complicated, more effort as you kind of get up to fine tuning. And we needed to understand that so that we could weed through the use cases. So that's just a few examples of the type of learning that we're doing. And are we offering this to clients? Absolutely. We engage with clients almost on a weekly basis. A lot of the corporate legal departments are looking to advise their business units. They want to understand so that they can make key decisions. And of course, our attorneys are working from the copyright fair use side, data privacy side. All of that comes together, I think, are instrumental in collaborating with everyone.
So Katherine, that's terrific and very on point for what we're doing this webinar for, because we did really want to take it beyond the hype and talk about those practical use cases. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about examples of those use cases that you identified and are working on now?
Yeah, so we're working on a few categories, let's say. One would be on client collaboration and optimization. So working with a specific client, do in fact we create supplemental information that we want to share with a GPT-4 model, for example. You can fill in the blank, whatever model you're thinking of. But for us right now, we're focused on GPT-4. We are looking at potential opportunities of building vector databases. Think of it as a bucket to put documents in that we can otherwise help accelerate the training of the GPT-4 model. Would we do that for one client, for many clients? Maybe, we don't know. That's a big idea that's being bounced around right now. We do like the idea of embedding. Could I create an embedding model on a certain attorney so I can do a style transformation? Meaning as you ask a prompt, it outputs, and it is in the output of a style of one of our attorneys. Contracts. This is a huge collaborative effort with clients from everything from playbook creation to parsing and extract contracts, which we have for right now. But is there a better way to do this? And is generative AI that tool? So that's something that we're looking at. Away from the client collaboration, I would say one of mine, and I think I've spoke to this group before about it, is data management. It's one of our passions. It's a really big deal. It was a big deal before generative AI came on the scene, but I think Gen AI gives us the opportunity to really take hold of all of that unstructured text that we have in our industry, because we're professional services. Everything sits in a document or sits in our brain. And how can we use this technology to help parse and extract, create some executable or automation to move us forward and make more meaning of the dark data or data otherwise hidden in those documents. And then last but not least, I'll say this because we have a lot of back office ideas, but the one that pops for me and I think is the highest priority is security operations. So from our security team, could we be looking at logs? Could we be detecting vulnerability and even training tabletop exercises for us to stay ever present and aware of how we might be more secure as a law firm? And with recent press, I think that's a one to call to attention. Great opportunity.
Well, that's a very robust list and some great conversation starters. I would ask Darth, from your perspective, again, flipping to the in-house perspective, do you see similar use cases, or do you think there might be some that are bespoke or unique to the in-house experience?
It's a good question. And I'll take that in two parts. Like, what do I kind of see in-house legal departments leveraging the technology for? And then the next logical step with that would be, how does that impact our relationship with outside counsel? So what can it do? It can read, summarize, annotate, analyze, translate, categorize, and interpret text, right? So that's what you can point it at in the now. In the near future, it'll also be able to do that with pictures. Contract drafting. How can we automate the drafting process, letting the lawyers get back to either more complex legal issues or spend their time on higher risk issues? Document review, and I don't just mean e-discovery, I mean reviewing large volumes of documents and synthesizing that information so that you can extract business intelligence from it in a timely manner. Legal research, we're using it on legal research so that we can get insights into legal precedent, case law, and allowing us to make those decisions much quicker. Intellectual property, I think there's in the near term probably a good argument that you can use this for automating some of the drafting for IP issues. And then compliance and litigation. There are current use cases, but in the future, I think to Katherine's earlier point, the thing that this technology has done, at least in my mind, is it's overcome the unstructured data obstacle, right? The text obstacle. In trying to create models in the past, the biggest hurdle was the amount of time and effort it took to extract clean and structured data. In any organization, only probably about 10% of the data is structured, meaning that you could use it in the prior models. I think from this, you're going to have enough information to start really getting into predictive analytics, getting upstream on issues by analyzing past and historical data, so that you'll be able to advise your clients on emerging legal risk based on the corpus of data that's in your current stream. And to me, that's where you get above and beyond kind of the cause and effect relationship of the client and the attorney. In the future, I would imagine that our outside counsel are now advising me on issues they see coming around the corner based on this technology. The technology, in my mind, at least right now, and I caveat that because if you would have asked me 3 years ago, I thought we were 10 years away from this point. But right now, I don't know that it changes dramatically the relationship between in-house counsel and outside counsel, because the technology at this point is helping replace tasks, repetitive low-end tasks that are necessary but aren't necessarily high value. As some of those tasks are replaced, lawyers aren't single-purpose lawyers. They're going to be repurposed to higher and better uses. And there's going to be no shortage of kind of the volume of things coming down the pipeline, because as the arms race, grows and all sides get access to this, you can imagine a world where plaintiffs' attorneys are spinning up thousands of complaints in a day, or clients are expecting an answer in a matter of minutes instead of a matter of days on complex issues. I just think you've never seen an evolution in tech that didn't accompany a tremendous amount of workload that comes along with that. I mean, when the personal computer was invented, we thought the work week was going to go to 20 hours. And I don't know about any of you, but as a practicing attorney, I've been chained to my laptop for like the last 2 decades. You're expected to, bill on trains and planes, before court, after court. I don't see the volume of work decreasing, and I see it increasing. And therefore, I think you're not going to be able to insource everything. You're still going to need to have that relationship with your outside counsel and those partnerships in place to be able to effectively operate in the future.
Terrific. Great food for thought. And keeping on the in-house train, Lydia, do you have any additional thoughts you want to share on good use cases for generative AI?
Yeah. So we did is we've been going through and we actually, crowdsource a lot of information from our own people too, to start identifying what are some, existing or new use cases that we could apply, generative AI, and put a lot of our smart heads around it. And through all that, we really came up with 3 themes. We like groups of 3 at Microsoft. So you'll probably hear that in a lot of my talking points, but advise, so really more of that knowledge management, area, and governance, transact, contracting, and comply, which includes a lot of the regulatory efforts. So that's where we'll do other areas, but those are 3 of the priorities we're going to be continuing to do, like what Katherine and others were talking about, that exploration and that experimentation. And then to your earlier question, Sarah, things that we learn and value, we will be sharing externally to help as we figure them out. We actually have a community called a Legal Ops Technical Sharing Community, where we like to share out information that we learn. So those are some of the use case areas that you'll probably see more of our internal department start experimenting with. And we're also going to be thinking a lot more on the context that we put are these large language models around. So as y'all know, with ChatGPT, really the context is, the entire web. And it doesn't capture a lot of the specific jargon we use in legal words in the legal world. So we're also going to be needing to look at our experts and internally, externally, whether our firms, ourselves, to help define that context of what the models should be.
Fantastic. And to round it out, Casey, you have the opportunity to pulse with a whole lot of different parts of the ecosystem. You're engaging with different technology providers, you're engaging with law firms, you're engaging with in-house teams. What do you think the winners are in terms of smart use cases?
So I think the smart use cases are myriad. And as I was just communicating with someone else who's sitting on the call, the killer use cases are a bit few and far between. So Darth mentioned the personal computer, like spreadsheets were the killer app for the original computer. Tetris was the killer app for the Game Boy. The thing that everyone wants and that gets everybody really excited. I think that's part of the challenge. But as for the use cases, there are so many lower level collation and synthesis of information tasks that are inherent in legal. I think those are the earliest ones we're going to see, whether it's in contracting or litigation, anywhere else. Where I think we're really going to start to feel the impact is in the projects that allow us to move upstream. And it's not just the predictive piece that Darth talked about of looking around corners, but how do we take the tech and use it to embed legal knowledge in business processes so that we can achieve compliance by design, and we can de-lawyer business processes without de-legaling them. Because it's not just that there's a lot of low-level knowledge work that we do to collect and collate information. There's actually, for a lot of us, a fair amount of low-level advice and communication. And some of it's verbal, some of it's over, a lot of it's over email, some of it's over Slack. I'm guessing some of it's now over Threads. Who knows? But we can do a lot more, not just from self-service, which has been always kind of a dream of part of that legal front door, but beyond that, and really embed legal knowledge in business processes in ways that are probably currently difficult for us to really wrap our heads around, just because, as Dar said, 3 years ago, you would have thought it was 10 years away. And it's certainly not here today, but it looks a lot more like 18 months to 3 years than it does 5 to 10.
Terrific. So that's a lot to chew on, and an interesting common thread among everything I'm hearing here is that it does sound like everybody has moved past the notion of if and is already thinking about how and when and to what degree, which again, as an industry, is a very exciting place to be. It almost seems as if the usual time period where naysayers try to kill something has just been leapt over. Notwithstanding, many of you probably caught the recent news coverage about the now famous attorneys who attempted to lean into ChatGPT to do some brief writing and citing, and ended up getting sanctioned because the cases they cited did not exist, and ChatGPT very helpfully tried to make something up that would be useful, and it was incorrect. It was false. Now, luckily, already we're seeing that the coverage of that went from a breathless, oh my God, is the technology not ready for prime time, to realizing, oh my goodness, this is just a story about bad lawyering, not fulfilling your basic ethical duties to site check a case before you submit it. And that trajectory happened pretty quickly, which is encouraging to see. So with that in mind, talking about how we all move forward as an industry, I'd love to hear from our panelists more about this collaboration. It does sound like everyone's making great strides within their organization to explore and attack, but do people have thoughts on the best way to collaborate and to bridge that divide between provider, client, technology creator? And I'd love to start with Katherine, who alluded to a bit of this earlier about how collaboration with clients is happening right now.
Yeah, I think as this kind of hit the scene, early this year into the summertime, I think most of the corporate legal departments that we're working with are just trying to manage those business units and trying to help the overarching organization make really good strategic next steps. And so I think that's really where the collaboration can be right now. But I think soon thereafter, really want to work with the legal team to envision, all right, which of these use cases would be of high value to them, high impact to them, and where can we help support that, help share our expertise with them, and help increase the collaboration and utilization of technology inside of legal services. That's certainly where it's headed for us. So we strongly encourage that. In the meantime, I will say that your own efforts and making sure you understand and not be like the bad lawyer, which was obviously misunderstood the technology if that's how they used it. But certainly vendors, I think, are making this huge approach. I think I've said it before on this call. I think anybody that has a SaaS solution is going to be looking at it and thinking, what can we do? A lot of them are looking for beta testers, and that may be where you can kind of sharpen your knowledge so that, when you're collaborating with the corporate legal departments or clients, that you're really ready to take action and start to hit some of these more prominent use cases that we talked about.
So terrific. So Darth, back to you. Thoughts on collaboration? To what extent are you drawing your outside counsel into your process?
No, we are collaborating with some of our outside counsel on use cases. We are trying to determine where we can get our best ROI, while also, frankly, getting all of our outside counsel partners familiar with the technology and the expectation that it'll be used to give us efficient, high quality work product. I think in a for an outside firm, you need to clearly communicate to your client if you're going to use this technology. You need to understand how they feel about it, what the parameters are with respect to their expectations of use. And I will say I see a couple of issues down the road. One is as law firms start to develop their own models based on the corpus of their data, inherently in that that data set is our work product. So we are interested in understanding how you're utilizing that work product, potentially what value it's creating above and beyond what was initially contemplated. But I think there's also interesting opportunities to work together on those kinds of things. I will also say that if you're going to work in tandem with a legal department, you're going to have to determine how you can monetize this in a way that's fair to everyone. And the in-house legal department has to have a realistic expectation of that as well. I don't think we're looking to replace our outside counsel, but we are looking to see which of them are reevaluating how their business model is structured, because as it stands right now, the time is a poor proxy for the value at this point with respect to some of these tasks. How are you internally going to change your model so that you're still profitable, but you're fair to your clients? And also, how are you reevaluating talent internally? If you're still evaluating all of your timekeepers based on the amount that they bill and not how efficient and good they are, then your chances of long-term success, given this emerging technology, are probably dwindling somewhat. So just food for thought, but I would recommend if you are thinking about using your client's data and information in your exploration of generative AI, get their consent up front. They should not be surprised on the back end.
Okay, so no surprises. That's a good admonition in all aspects of life, except perhaps surprise parties. Okay, Lydia, take us home. What are your thoughts on collaboration outside of the Microsoft legal team?
Yeah, well, I think all of my fellow panelists brought up great calls. So I had one that actually builds right off what Garth was just talking about, is we're definitely going to have to see more of the value-based billing and exploration with our law firms to be able to figure out how do we partner and figure out the right fee structure that actually incentivizes using this technology going forward and making sure that we're getting the best returns on investments, because the prior structure has really created a constraint that makes it harder to do these experiments. And we want ways to remove this, which also really helps is we want to be great partners. So one of the best ways we can do that, together is really experimenting together between in-house and our law firms. So for example, our general counsel, had told us that it was really important that we get all of our outside counsel work product into our new centralized document management system, so we can start doing some really cool things. And we went to a couple of different firms. And one of our firms, Perkins Coie, was really great. They spent a lot of time working with us, understanding the use case, and investing with us to actually plug into one of the APIs that our own internal engineering team built to bring all their work product into our document management system. So actions like this from all of our firms that really aligns with what you hear an in-house general counsel want will be really helpful for both parties, going forward. And then also is just continuing on the experimenting. We're also experimenting with other third-party tools as well as our own in-house builds. You may have heard of one, counsel, where we're experimenting. One of our other firms is experimenting, and we're able to share, learnings together. So I think that's great. As a whole industry, and for our firms and our fellow in-house or even our technology providers, is we need everyone to really embrace that the technology is here. Not only is it not going anywhere, but it's only going to get faster, which I think has been a theme that we continue to hear throughout this panel. So that old approach of waiting and letting others, try it out and jumping on the bandwagon later is not going to work, because it's moving so fast. It's going to be harder for those that have not been part of the journey early on to catch up.
So Casey, hearing what we're hearing everyone say about collaboration, you have the chance to work with a whole bunch of technology and services companies. How well do you think the creators, let's say, of the next generation of generative AI solutions are collaborating with their current and future potential clients in developing those?
Like anything, there's a dispersion, and it's a normal distribution. Some extremely poorly, some extremely well, and most somewhere in that mushy middle. Although I would say that that's kind of always true of tech providers and customers, and it's a bilateral challenge. It's not all on the tech providers. Sometimes sometimes the customers could themselves be better at collaboration, separating must-haves from nice-to-haves, and not engaging in the missing feature fallacy, which is the urge to say, wouldn't it be great if it did one more thing? Because there is always another thing. But frankly, most providers, this is as new to them as it is to us. They weren't paying attention to GPT-3 and GPT 3.5. And even when ChatGPT came out, as I wrote at the time, it was the trailer, not the movie. If you didn't know what was coming, most of the people on this call had the privilege of having early access. I could see you thinking that this is just another fad, and so they haven't really. A lot of them just woke up to it, and realized that they're already behind, and they're scrambling to catch up. But just because you work in tech does not mean you really understand how the large language models work, let alone how to incorporate them into systems. There's a lot of things that are familiar in terms of encrypting data at rest and data in motion, and worrying about API calls. But in terms of the capabilities, they're brand new to a lot of these folks, and they're scrambling because they at the same time they need to learn. They feel like they also need to make noise, that they're going to do something with it. There's been a lot of announcement of previews or pilots that aren't exactly open for anyone to see, just so companies can say, yeah, we're working on this. We hear you. It's really important, because our customers ask about it in every meeting. And so I agree with Katherine that the noise is deafening and problematic, but I also think it's quite comprehensible given how new this truly is. And I think it's gonna take a while for us to settle into something that's a bit more productive across the board. Again, outliers on both extremes. Some really bad actors, I shouldn't name names, but Do Not Pay was gross. And some really good examples of collaborations on the other end, but in the middle, it's a lot of mush, a lot of noise, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time before we're in a really good place where vendors are getting value from their conversations with clients about what should we build, and clients are getting value from having had those conversations with vendors, getting things built that meet their needs.
So Casey, we won't hold you to it, but if you had to prognosticate and predict how long it will be until we settle into more of a steady state, out of exploration and more into everyday purchasing and doing, what do you think our lead time is going to be?
Again, there'll be a dispersion. Some things will be here sooner than we think, but 18 months is where I think we start to enter probably a more mature phase. And I know we all want it to be sooner, and I hope I'm wrong on that, but that would be my prediction.
Okay, well, we'll mark our calendars for roughly 18 months from now to do a recap of everything we've learned since this webinar. Now, for folks on the line who are observing, if you'd like to participate and put a question into the chat, now is a fabulous time to do it. Or you can signal to me through a chat if you want us to call on you and you can ask your question directly. While people are contemplating everything they want to ask, I will ask this panel, tell us if there's one thing, one tip, one suggestion that you could leave each person on this call here with today. It can be an idea you've already had, an idea you want to pursue, an observation about where we're at when it comes to generative AI. What do you think a key takeaway for our audience today should be? And I will start with Darth.
I think a key takeaway, at least from what a lot of the participants have said thus far, is don't wait to start getting involved in this. Don't wait for 18, 24 months before you think it's somehow ready for prime time. Time on the field matters. Get your reps in, get your team familiar with what the technology can do, whether or not you're actually going to start the process formally. I just think it's the kind of thing that if you are behind, you can get left behind. So I'd start today.
Fantastic. And Lydia, we'll turn to you next. And then I do see we have some questions streaming in. So we'll give our takeaways and then we'll back up into the questions.
Sounds great. And of course, agree with Darth on just get out there, start experimenting. But one of the things that I would really caution everyone is don't forget about the culture and the people part of this journey is you can bring in all the great technology you want, but if you don't bring your people along with it, you won't be successful. So communicate to your people early and often and recognize. So, we've been starting some good marketing campaigns internally. We've been asking people to, whether it's joining an early adopter program for one of the new, things we're building, and then sending out recognition letters. We're making sure, everyone is talking about it and people understand. To the earlier point, it's about, augmenting and helping our people.
Terrific. Casey, what's your takeaway?
You need to do something, but to the extent you have that kind of action bias, then it's going to become really important to choose what not to do, because you can go in almost any direction with this tech. It's very flexible, but it's also very frail, and you are going to be limited in your bandwidth. And so it's going to require some integrative thinking around your strategy and what's most important to your business to decide really where to put your efforts and resources. So think slow, act fast, but definitely do the thinking.
Terrific. And the last but not least word from Katherine.
I like a phrase that's I say all the time, it's rinse and repeat. So build a strategy that you can rinse and repeat over and over again. When it comes to emerging technology, I think it is aptly suited for that, because it used to be that I felt that emerging tech was going to be on a 10-year cycle. I think that is affected. Maybe it's 2 to 4. Something like Gen AI is going to happen in the future. And you need to use a strategy that you build now to be able to assess it, take action, and decide how it's going to impact you and your organization. So for strategy's sake, I would say be ready to rinse and repeat.
Fantastic. We've had some excellent questions come in. I'll see if we can rapid fire, try to hit them in our minutes remaining together. The first is specifically for in-house counsel. So let's ask Darth or Lydia from the in-house perspective. What are you asking your outside law firms about their use, training, and policies related to generative AI? And I suppose, Katherine, if you've experienced those inquiries, feel free to pipe up as well. But does anyone have any views on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing we did is we went out and surveyed what our outside counsel are actually doing. What are you using? And we've asked very specific questions about whether you're using our data in any training with respect to the models you're developing. What we're really interested in is how you're, meeting your duty of technological competency and your duty not to charge us an unreasonable fee. What are you engaged in that will meet your ethical obligations and still provide us with world-class work product? And we've received some responses back, so it's interesting to see kind of the spectrum where outside counsel is on this. But I think it's going to become an expectation of in-house counsel here over the next, year and a half, that a lot of the work that's being done has some component of this in it.
Agree with you, Darth, and also, things like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be continuing to asking, firms how they're willing to, partner with us and how they deliver, work product that in ways that align with our own internal goals of using AI and making that data informed decision making.
Terrific.
And maybe, Farah, I'll just say I have seen both polar opposites, and it is you're not using it right, and then you are using it and you will use it today, right? So it's a balance for us trying to figure out, how to keep everyone happy when it comes to that. But I will say that I like what Dar said, seek permission first. This isn't something we can do by ourselves. You need to be having those open dialogues. And on the other side, it's setting expectations that not everything here is ready for prime time, but as soon as it is, we will use it.
Great. Okay, so another question we have, which I recognize in the minutes we have remaining, we'll probably not be able to go into in depth, but the concept is this an area where we think we can get different legal teams partnering with each other to solve common challenges? So if companies have common litigation portfolios, is there a way that they could work together to train models or solve this in some way? Do people think this is in the cards for the future, or will people continue to want to solve it for their own organization?
It's a good question. It's a good idea. I just think the more common your litigation portfolio is, the closer you get to your competitor. And while competitors do have common interest in some areas, it would be complicated to navigate, but a clever idea, and certainly probably one worth discussing.
And we are just about out of time, and I want to respect everyone's schedule. So I will say one question right at the end, which I will hand over to the college's leadership team, is how might the College of Law Practice Management use this technology to advance its own mission? What a great question. We'll have to add that to the agenda for future discussions. In the meantime, everybody out there, continue to explore. We hope everyone on their own journeys is making good progress. A great big thank you to our panelists today. Thank you to Darth, Casey, Lydia, Katherine for making the time to share with us. If there's interest, we'll do something like this again, maybe sooner than 18 months from now. We wish everybody a great summer.
Thank you. Thank you, Farah.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job. Thanks, everyone.